What is going on, everybody? Hope everyone is doing well. My name is Jason. I'll be your host on this CFL talk show, Hussey's Huddle. In this video, we're going to discuss some of the key re-signings so far this offseason, including just a lot of just interesting players, a lot of big-name players already inking new contracts for 2022, and I'm really excited to talk about this today. But really quickly, before we get started, if you want to support the channel, the best way to do it is by hitting the like button and subscribing to Hussey's Huddle for more CFL content just like this. I greatly appreciate it. And with that said, let's get on with the video. Okay, so as I mentioned off the jump, there are a lot of key players that have already inked new contracts for next season. And I also, where applicable, I put the contract numbers and how much players are going to be making in 2022. It's going to be the base salary, or sorry, the total salary of the contract, unless I state in the caption. So there are a handful of players where it's not applicable, where I couldn't find the information how much they're making next year, but you'll see that as we go forward with the video. So going in no particular order whatsoever, these are just completely randomized, just the way I thought about it. These are just some of the key free agent signings. Obviously didn't include everybody, but we're going to start with one of last season's MOP candidates, and that's wide receiver Lucky Whitehead, staying with the BC Lions on a 2-year deal that makes him the highest paid receiver in the CFL as of right now for 2022 at around $200,000 a season. I believe he gets a $205,000 in 2023, so about a $5,000 raise. But well-deserved for Lucky Whitehead. Honestly, I don't know if he's necessarily the best receiver in the league. Obviously, probably not the most well-rounded at this point. Still, expanding his route tree, but took a major step last season, and obviously is just a big playmaker for this offense. Really important for BC to be able to keep him. Now they can turn their attention to keeping Brian Burnham, their other star receiver. If they can keep that tandem intact, that's going to be really great news for them going forward. And then moving on to another wide receiver, a big-time wide receiver, who I actually ranked as the best wide receiver in the CFL in going into next season, and that's wide receiver Reggie Begelton of the Calgary Stampeders, staying with the Stampeders on a 1-year deal, signed midway through the season, just for the rest of the season, and then, re-upped with the team. He's going to get 1 year and $167K with the Stamps, and I think that's kind of a bargain considering you look what Whitehead just got. He signed just before Whitehead got his contract, but I'm really interested to see how Begelton does next year. Obviously, just a big re-signing for Calgary. I said a lot about him in my previous video of the top 15 wide receivers going into next season, so I don't want to repeat myself too much there. And then a couple of Alouettes key re-signings. These were two of the earliest ones, and that's quarterback Vernon Adams Jr. signing a 2-year deal till 2023, and then wide receiver Eugene Lewis. Lewis, I couldn't find the contract details for, but I believe it was a 1-year contract. And, obviously that's huge because he's one of the best receivers, really grown into one of the best receivers in the league. Just an all-around skill set. But Vernon Adams, he's scheduled to make $445,000 in base pay. He also got a massive signing bonus that I didn't include here. But he gets the 2-year contract, and it's going to be really interesting to see how he does next year. If he can stay healthy, that's the key thing with him after the big injury this year that knocked out the second half of his season. But I think, he's still a readily improving guy, and I think you still have to be really optimistic if you're an Alouettes fan going forward. He just has so many tools in his toolbox to continue his development going forward. Now moving on to the trenches, we have offensive lineman Darius Blodek of the Toronto Argonauts signing a 2-year extension worth $180K for 2022. And Blodek's just a really solid offensive lineman. This reportedly makes him the second highest paid offensive lineman as of right now for 2022, behind Edmonton center David Beard, according to 3Down Nation. And Blodek's just really solid. I think he was a big part of their offensive line turnaround this year in Toronto. And I think it's clear that they really wanted to keep him around, willing to pay a premium price to do it. And I'm excited to see what he does in 2022. Like I said, I haven't had a chance to really deep dive on the offensive line play game to game from 2021 yet, in anticipation of my roster reviews next year, but I am working through that. So I'm really excited to see, evaluate his game-to-game performance from this past season. Obviously, the Argos liked what they saw, like I said, and gave him the 2-year extension here. And then we have the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, who have been very busy. 4 re-signings here I want to talk about. Offensive lineman Jamarcus Hardrick, playing that right tackle position for this team, just been such a key part of their success. One of the best run blockers in the league. He gets 1 year for $150K, really key for the team to bring him back. And then a trio of defensive linemen in Jake Thomas, Willie Jefferson, and Jackson Jeffcoat. Just three really important guys. Thomas, a Canadian, really important for that ratio. But then Jeffcoat and Jefferson really speak for themselves. Two of the very best players, not just on the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, but in the entire league. I couldn't find the contract details for Jake Thomas, but for Willie Jefferson, he gets 1 year and $225K. One of the highest paid non-quarterbacks in the league. Probably the highest one I've seen so far given out this offseason that isn't a quarterback. And then Jeffcoat gets 1 year and $175K. Very well paid as well. I mean, I was surprised that there was so much of a gap there, a $50K gap between Jeffcoat and Jefferson, given that Jeffcoat had an outstanding season, almost just as good as Jefferson this year. But those two guys just so important to their success. The line of scrimmage is just so important for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers of the last couple years in their success. So really important re-signings. They're really just starting up front, and I'm just waiting on that extension for Zach Collaros at this point. A couple other guys, Kenny Lawler, but I think the core guys are really those guys up front for this team, and they've gotten a lot of those guys locked up for next season. Another guy inking a new contract is veteran defensive back TJ Lee with the BC Lions. BC didn't have the season that they wanted this year, obviously, falling apart down the stretch, but TJ Lee had another really strong season with this team. He's really the leader of that defense, especially on the back end. Just a really physical defensive back, but also can cover a lot of the other team's best receivers, and so it was really important for them to bring him back. I believe this is a 1 year deal. I really couldn't confirm this. I just saw that he got an extension, but I will put the details up on the screen if I find them. And then another defensive back, Nick Marshall of the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Very controversial player in CFL circles. Some people think he's one of the most overrated players in the entire league. Gives up a ton of big plays on the defensive side, but is also a guy that will take the ball away. He's a playmaker back there, so he provides value in that sense. I haven't done the whole deep dive on 2021 yet with the film and to see the extent at which he was giving up big plays, but really excited to do that. But he signs and stays around in Saskatchewan, was named an All-Star this past season despite all the critics. And then another Saskatchewan Roughriders signing here with defensive end AC Leonard, one of the best defensive ends in the entire league. Had some controversy this year with a suspension for, I think, using an illegal substance or something like that. But was the leader in sacks despite missing games this year. I think he had 11 sacks on the season. And just one of the most impactful defensive players in the entire league. Really important to them to keep him around here. He gets a 2-year deal, is going to make $205,000 for 2022. One of the higher paid players on this list that you've seen so far. And really key for Saskatchewan to bring him back. He's really one of their biggest playmakers on the defensive side or on either side of the ball. And then finally, closing out the video with another Saskatchewan Roughrider signing, and that's linebacker Micah Teitz. And he gets a 2-year deal with $115K total in his contract for next season. And I was surprised that this guy didn't receive more buzz for Most Outstanding Canadian this year. He had an outstanding season, really came out of nowhere, and took over that Cameron Judge role that was vacated when he left and went to Toronto this last offseason. And Teitz just had an outstanding season at linebacker, and I'm surprised he didn't actually get more here, because usually Canadian players that are starters, they usually see a big salary increase. So Teitz, I think this could be a bargain in a few years, or as early as next season, and I'm really interested to see if he can continue that form we saw in 2021. But with that said, those are just some players that have re-signed already this offseason. And I also just wanted to, include some of these contract details just to see, get a good gauge of what the market is right now for a lot of these players and how the salaries really increased from what we saw, a lot of salary cuts in 2021. So I think it's really interesting to look at that, and we'll continue to monitor that as we go through the offseason. But make sure to let me know in the comments section if I missed any key re-signings. And with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Peace.